I think it comes as no surprise that everything has gotten more expensive, including cars. I know they were a hot topic before, where the price of cars was just skyrocketing to just insane levels. I don't know if it's come down since then, but CNBC has put a video out as to why American cars are so expensive. I know there's a lot of Chinese alternatives, but they get tariffed into oblivion so that they don't actually you don't actually save that money if you wanted to buy a Chinese car. You don't get that option. So let's see what is going on in the car market. Why is everything so insane? But before we jump into it, this is the video right here. But I wanted to see some of the comments before I jumped into this, just to see, maybe what the video would be about. And they kind of are on the same topic here, saying your title should be why automakers won't make cheap cars. Someone says they're a mechanic and they choose not to make a cheap car. And then they make a lot of cheap cars. They just don't sell them inexpensively. So a lot of people saying, cars could be cheap, but they're decided not to. So maybe that is what they dive into here. Why car makers refuse to sell cars cheaply.
The average car price is nearly $50,000, a 30% increase over the past 5 years.
Basic automobile is $50,000 or more.
Monthly payments are also close to an all-time high.
There are plenty of models that are going for more than $100K.
A record number of owners are underwater, paying more on their loans than their vehicles are worth. Even so, automakers have resisted.
For this, actually, this is a massive problem with like the auto loan market, I guess, maybe. Like, people just continuously roll negative equity into new loans. It's such a massive problem. Everyone does this, so it's like just a normal thing. It's like common practice. But literally, this can drown people and drown you if you continuously roll negative equity into your next auto loan. That's what people do. They trade in their car, but because cars go down in value over time, they'll own a car for a few years, say they want a new one, still have a loan balance, their car will be less than the balance, and they'll just carry over the balance into their next loan. So, absolutely insanity. Like, I mean, you try to avoid that at all costs, but it's like a normal thing in this market.
Chinese cars are cheap, but those are getting slapped with tariffs. Insiders say U.S. carmakers can't depend on protectionism. They'll have to cut costs and sell cheaper. Even without government support, some Chinese firms have big advantages.
We tried to lay out that it's not evolutionary change. Like, you actually have to make quantum change to the organization, culture, and approach to be able to achieve that.
And this, for them saying, like, American manufacturers can't make cheap cars or can't compete in this, like China can make it because they have cheaper labor, stuff, whatever you want to point to. I think that there's a lot of things going on where maybe they're just not willing to. Maybe the comments are right. These companies just aren't willing to. They've been around forever. They've been bailed out of bad decisions. These traditional automakers, I know it might have been Ford. I don't know if it might be Ford, might be like the only one. I might be getting this backwards, but they're car manufacturers that should have gone bankrupt that the government bailed out, kind of like the financial crisis when they bailed out banks. They bailed out these automakers, and they should have went bankrupt, and somebody who knew what they're doing should have took their place, but instead we're stuck with these companies. I mean, we can kind of see with like the rise of Tesla. Like, you may not agree that Tesla's worth what it's trading for and the stock valuation, all this stuff, but they came out of nowhere, developed these cars that are cheaper than average. You can get a Model 3 for $30,000 or $40,000. So it might be marginally cheaper than average, but they can still get them a little bit cheaper. So they might be doing something right, and maybe we gotta look at what they're doing, right? Maybe they have some sort of solution there. So if you can make cars cheaper, you can sell them cheaper and maintain profit margins. That's what the corporate world's going to care about.
Americans are paying more for nearly everything than they were a few years ago. But car prices have outpaced even inflation. They're off pandemic-era highs, but not by a lot.
What do you think about how car prices have been over the last few years?
They're astronomical, but I mean, the technology keeps advancing.
I like I'm blocking, hold on. I like that. Craig Banks, car owner. He's a car owner, guys. We know what he says is true.
Technology isn't free.
I shopped around quite a bit. Before I was driving a Toyota Highlander, and the prices had went up a lot. and it was not all electric, and I wanted to move to something more environmentally friendly. So I went with the Tesla.
Oh my goodness. I was trying to repurchase the Camry and using the prices that I had from 10 years ago, and it just wasn't, it wasn't the same.
So what does the industry
That is
consider an
kinda crazy.
affordable car? According to the Center for Automotive Research, it would cost about $25,000. The average US household spends about 15% of income on transportation. That's everything: car, gas, maintenance, and so on. So, about 51% of the population can reasonably afford a loan on a $25,000 car at 8% interest for 48 months.
I don't know what that payments would be. Probably not too insane, but like, I still think this is kind of crazy. Maybe I'm a moron, but $25,000 loan for a car, and that's like, oh, that's great. You hit the jackpot. You got $25,000 loan for a car at 8% interest. I don't know. That doesn't sound like it's amazing to me. I know. I guess what the average they says is like 40 something thousand, almost 50,000. So this is half of that, but it still doesn't sound appealing. 25 grand for a car, like on a loan, $25,000 loan. I mean, that just seems crazy. I don't know. Maybe, shop around for a different car for that's 15K and maybe try and pay cash for it instead. Maybe that's an insane take, but maybe a cheaper car is an option.
If you extend the term of the loan, the percentage goes up from there. The issue is there are very few cars at that price. Prior to 2018, cars that sold for less than $20,000 made up about a fifth of the market. Since then, they have all but vanished. A few models might start there, but no car sold in September 2024 had an average sticker price below $20K. Only 6 are below $25. Meanwhile, models and sales of new cars over $60,000 have soared.
You're selling directly to people who want a lot of bells and whistles, and so there isn't a lot of direct targeting of people who would want a small, cheap car. This might be
this is something that's a problem too. I'm pausing too much, but like, there's a huge demand, I think, for a car that is basic. That's like just a basic car, doesn't have all of the crap put into it. That just you get in there and it has, either I know some people want no computer, so it's just like the car, like super old school, or just super basic. There's huge demand for that, and that would be a cheap way to get a car. But for some reason, they don't want to make that. You know what? I'm starting to think the comments might have been onto something.
Here's how they got so expensive. Factor 1, the continued rise of the sport utility vehicle. They went from about 30% of sales in 2009 to over 50% in 2019. Americans just love big cars. When Ford released the now discontinued subcompact EcoSport SUV, it said the average price would be $4,500 higher than Ford would get from the Fiesta, even though the SUV and the car shared the same platform. Second factor, priorities changed.
the legacy automakers in the US have been pretty explicit about, we are going for profits, we are not going for volume. And so we are going to sacrifice volume if it gives us a bigger margin. And that's a different strategy than they've followed in the past.
GM has become known for this strategy, especially under current CEO Mary Barra. Fiat Chrysler, now Stellantis, was very early to cutting high volume but low profit vehicles like sedans. In 2023, profits at GM and Ford were the highest in at least a decade, and Stellantis reported a record.
So this, I think, could actually come back and bite them. So obviously every company focuses on profits, right? But if you're not doing the volume, you open the door for someone else to come in and get that brand loyalty. I think like Ford, Chevy, these are companies that people have kind of developed brand loyalty to. But I don't know when it was, back like a decade ago or a couple decades ago, Hyundai originally was like a no-name car. It was like here and there, people didn't really know it, and now it's a staple. It's with the Honda and Toyotas. When you think of like reliable cars, you think of Hyundai, Honda, Toyota. They kind of put themselves in that market. So by them focusing on sales or price instead of volume, that means the group of people that you could have sold to if you had higher volume might look elsewhere, and it opens the door for some other company to come in and just offer a reliable alternative, and they at a good price, and they say, you know what, done, we got that. And now, for a short period of time, they might be making more money. A long period, they might actually lose customers.
General Motors, for example, has these activist investors sitting on their board, and if they don't buy back billions of dollars worth of stock, Mary Barra could be out of a job. And so it forces a more short-term calculation than she might want.
The trouble for automakers, the business is not that profitable compared with others. About
everything.
70% of a vehicle's price goes to the direct cost of producing it.
Tough this smart can only be called F-150.
About 20 to 25% goes to marketing and everything else. That leaves a 5 to 10% profit. Third factor, the coronavirus pandemic. Production shutdowns, supply chain shortages, and other constraints tightened supply. Dealers raised prices. Then automakers did. Affordability plummeted.
Remember, the story has been, for much of the last 6 months, you either cut price or you cut volume. And they've decided they're not cutting price.
But profits come at the cost of increasingly alienated customers.
Automakers meet with their dealerships on a regular basis, and particularly they do this every January at one specific gathering. And the news that came out of that gathering last year was dealerships were saying, please send us more things that we can profitably sell for less. I guess that's the message they're getting from people walking in the door.
People want cars that don't cost the same as a house. That, like, we're on our way to $100,000 average car price, and that's just not sustainable. That's just not going to happen. Like, if it gets to there, people are going to look elsewhere and get cars that aren't astronomically expensive. That's probably a longer term outlook. I think this is all just opening the door to competitors coming in and taking market share. I just don't see, them continue raising prices and people just blindly buying them and extending the loan period from 5 years to what we're going to have 30-year car loans now. Like, I just don't see that happening. I don't see it being sustainable. And China will definitely come in and eat everyone's lunch if they're going to plan to go with prices instead of volume, because China will gladly go with volume to swarm the market, and then they'll focus on prices.
So the question is, how do American automakers get those prices down? There is some wind at their backs. EVs are expected to get cheaper with time. Battery costs are falling faster than forecasted, with big drops to come. New, stronger forms of steel may allow car makers to use less. The simple skateboard platforms EVs are built on are easily adapted to vehicles of different sizes, spreading out costs.
Maybe this is crazy. I don't think EVs are as popular as everyone wants them to be. I don't think people are dying for EVs. I think people are fine with the cars they have now, with the ICE cars, and not having to worry about charging, or will they make it somewhere, or the stations exist. Maybe when the infrastructure is better and the charging's better, where you can take 5 minutes to charge and be all good. I mean, maybe then it'll catch on, but I don't think they're too popular. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe everyone wants EVs, but I don't see that being the thing.
The Chevrolet Equinox, GM's least expensive EV, is about $300,000 less than the Cadillac Celestiq, GM's priciest, but they use the same platform. New manufacturing methods can help too. Tesla said its proposed, but not yet implemented, unboxing method can cut costs in half and factory size by nearly that much. Automakers might also partner and consolidate. Two companies can share production lines and make similar cars with different brands.
Speaking of that, I don't know if this is the same thing, but Honda and Nissan were like merging or coming together. So this whole thing is coming to roost a lot faster than anyone thought, because those are massive companies and they're coming together, merging. I might say that the industry as a whole is not in such a healthy spot. That's what I get from that. Like, car manufacturers are not in a healthy spot, and maybe they picked the wrong road to go down.
One can contract with another to build vehicles for a country where the first has no presence.
Could be a BYD setting up shop in Mexico, having a partnership with one of the U.S. car makers or brands, and then they sell vehicles here with the appropriate sharing of the final assembly costs.
On the policy side, Helper says regulatory certainty is another necessary condition for cheaper EVs. Stability and predictability around incentives, subsidies, and public-private partnerships. U.S. rules change frequently, which makes it harder for companies to plan. In contrast, when China went forward on EVs, it stuck with the policy. The country has even benefited from unstable policies in the U.S. The cheap lithium iron phosphate batteries that contributed to China's dominance were actually created in the US by a company with a Department of Energy grant. But then,
gas was really cheap. Policies were not consistently applied. They went bankrupt. They were bought very, very cheaply by the Chinese. I mean, not to take away from the Chinese. They figured out how to scale it up, but they got a leg up, based on American taxpayer research.
I don't know if I would say that exactly. The Chinese, figured it out. I think China's model is swarm the market with cars and figure out how to make money later. I do not think they are making money selling EVs. They're losing tons of money doing it, but they don't care. They want to get the brand out there. I have people say a $15,000 car, Chinese car, it's great. It's as good as the cars that are around here, and I get it for a quarter of the price. People are going to go with the Chinese car. And then they can figure out how to make money after that, after they've swarmed the market and everyone wants Chinese cars. So I think that's their model, not that they figured everything out.
Chinese firms rely heavily on methods like virtual testing rather than the physical tests favored by others. This cuts months off schedules and hundreds of millions of dollars from budgets. They have a shorter time to market. Non-Chinese brands take about 5.4 years to develop a new model. Legacy Chinese brands, 3.5. New energy vehicle brands like BYD, 1.6. Deadlines are hard, even if that means releasing a subpar vehicle. These companies have an intense overtime culture.
Most of them do not allow this drift that Western companies do. And they're willing to, most of them do not allow this.
This is what, average hours of overtime? Okay, for a launch month, so not all the time, but yeah, the Chinese, they are 100 hours of overtime in a launch month. Yeah, they're about it. They're telling people to figure it out, get to work, and go build these cars. How much of that is, them wanting to do that or them being forced to do it? Probably the latter, but that's insane. 100 hours of overtime is
that
crazy.
Western companies do. And they're willing to put a bad vehicle out there and suffer the consequences because they consider the alternative to be a guaranteed loss. If I take 40 months to make the vehicle, I can't make a competitive vehicle.
They're also willing to endure large losses early as they get to scale. There are two benefits: higher volumes, which help spread costs, but also a lot of learning in that painful early period.
This desire for short-term profits by American investors, these activist investors, makes that strategy hard. China has taken large losses for a long time. And this is their playbook. They do this in industry after industry.
There's very little forgiveness for a CEO today who says they make losses on a vehicle or a vehicle line or a whole new propulsion technology. And so they're questioned every quarter. And so they're thinking of it every day. And so it's in that sense where if you now move from a $60,000 vehicle or a $70,000 vehicle or a $40,000 vehicle to now suddenly announcing affordable vehicles at $25,000, you get doubly questioned because you're making even more of a loss per vehicle.
And that has been China's direct, their strategy with everything is, steal it, get a company to come into their country, learn what they do, and then knock it off and just steal their IP from them, or swarm the market, make sure that everything Chinese is getting pushed out, swarm the market, everyone starts to get into it, and then figure out what to do from there, how to make money. The difference being comparing it to American companies, and they say the investors want profits. That American companies have investors who give them money to figure out how to do stuff, and they make money and have shareholders, all this different types of stuff. So that forces them to have to figure out how to make money at least a little bit to make people happy. Where the Chinese ones, they don't have that. They have the government. The government's saying, go do this. We don't care what happens. We want to dominate the market. We want market share. We don't care about losing money. So it's two different approaches, right? Which one will win? If the Chinese ones can figure out how to make money, then, they could win by doing this volume play, or they could taper out and get the volume, but then not be able to do anything with it because people aren't going to be buying a car every other year, right? They're going to keep it for a long time, but maybe they can figure it out. But it's two drastically different ways to go about this whole market. So why are American cars so expensive? I don't even know if we actually got the answer to that question, but pretty much it's just two different philosophies going at it, with American side wanting profits up front and focusing on profits instead of volume, and the Chinese side taking the exact opposite approach, pushing out volume and worrying about profits later. Who wins in that scenario? If the Chinese manufacturers can last, long enough to figure out how to make money, then they're good. But if they can't, then the American one wins by default because they're continuing to make money to be able to stay afloat. It's also two different things. Like the government of China is behind this on their side, not really so much in the U.S., much more investor led. So which one's going to work? Don't know. I do think the American one of focusing on profits and lowering volumes opens the door to a competitor to come in, like China and Chinese cars, to come in and fill that volume by providing a car that people can afford that might be, 90% of the quality of what the cars that double the price are going for. That's gonna do it for this video. As always, smash and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next